You have heard the aphorism, facts tell, but stories sell. But what if you found out that was only half true? And what can you learn right here and now that will help you with the very next persuasive email you send? Well, hello and welcome to Neuroscience-driven persuasive emails. My name is Roger Corville, and welcome to another episode of V2's Thought Leader Conversations series. I know that you know, but we here at V2 specialize in pairing really specific use cases around virtual or hybrid events with whatever specific platform best suits that. But today's Thought Leader Conversation not only helps with all of them, but it's going to help you beyond virtual and hybrid events as well. And I'm really pleased to have with me an old friend, an acquaintance from long ago, Donnie Bryant, who is a direct response copywriter and marketing consultant, has generated more than $120 million worth of business for his clients. Donnie, it is really good to see you again.
Great to see you. And it's true, I'm old.
Well, I didn't mean it that way. And one of us sporting a little more white than the other one of us. But hey, I loved this thought from your website, Donnie, which was just said, "What's different about DB?" Do you mind telling us a little bit about who you are and kind of how you approach this stuff?
Sure. Well, let me say first, I appreciate being on this show. That's like a platitude, but it really is true. What's different about DB? One of the things that I feel is really different about me is that a lot of copywriters and a lot of marketing professionals, they spend a lot of time. This will sound derogatory to the industry, but everything has an agenda, right? To ultimately sell you something or to push you in the direction. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that's what we do. Direct response, we're trying to get people to take action. But on a podcast like this or conversation, I really have nothing to sell you. I have extremely low likelihood that there's anything more than just a fun conversation, and for me to share my brain and my experience with you. So I have no agendas other than entertaining. I hope to be entertaining and educating. So that's important for me. Also, I don't teach anything that I haven't done. You find a lot of people in our industries, both industries, read a book or they watch a video or they take a $47 course and they want to call themselves an expert. And we all start somewhere. I've been doing this for a long time, hence the oldness. So I've had a lot of experience, made a lot of mistakes, tried a lot of things, and found a lot of things, or I found a number of things that work really well. And I'm only going to talk about what I know. And again, with the intent of being helpful to you. I've said a long time ago, I intend to be the most generous guy in my space. I don't know if I've attained that level, but that's the goal. So I think that makes me a little bit different than others.
That's why I love this guy. And true story, I have hired Donnie in the past. So there you go. And the reason I'm just like got goosebumps now, Donnie, is because that's where I'm at too. And that's one of the things I love about the crew that I work with now, virtual venues, is because we help first and worry about money later. And it always works out because the people who understand your value pay you, and those that don't aren't going to hire you anyway. So
100%.
So the question on the table, talking about persuasive email, and Donnie, I know just because I've known you a good long time, how important neuroscience and that is. But if you were going to boil it down, what's the most essential part of thinking about an email when your intent is some form of response?
Cool. It's a great question. And it's the question, right? Here's something that most people will not tell you. And partially because they don't know or haven't thought of it this way. But all persuasion is really self-persuasion. So we think that we're saying something, that some power words or some tricky phrases or whatever that get people to see things our way. But at its core, persuasion starts with a person in their own internal dialogue saying, this is interesting to me. This gets me closer to my goals, whether they're stated or not, on the subconscious level, you're saying this is pleasurable to me, or this is taking me away from something that I don't want. And they begin to talk themselves into listening to you. They talk themselves into going forward with your proposition and whatever your offer is, et cetera. So you start there by piquing someone's interest into talking themselves into persuading themselves to to pay attention and to follow along with your narrative.
Makes me think of another aphorism, which is people hate to be sold but love to buy. Would that be consistent with how you were just phrasing that?
100%.
Okay.
I think some people don't mind being sold.
Yeah, right. Though not only probably most people don't, or many people don't, but a lot of people don't like selling, right? I mean, and I would imagine a good chunk of our audience here, given that we're in the virtual and hybrid events business, are thinking about direct response with regard to driving demand for a webinar or a virtual event or a recording. But the underlying principles are the same. Would that be fair? Whether you're trying to get them to pick up the phone to call you for something or some other response that you desire?
Yeah, exactly. At its core, all of these things are the same. At a virtual event, if you have your call to action during the event, and whatever it is, and your email and a phone call and an infomercial, and it's just a person-to-person talk. All persuasion works out to the same fundamental things. Here's how I say it. I'll just put my thing out there.
Yeah.
When we're talking about self-persuasion, and people are really driven by their dreams and desires, their pains and problems, their fears and frustrations. Those are the things that they care about. And every different audience, of course, every individual is an individual. They have their own version of those things. If you have a target audience, your target audience you have to have a little bit broader stroke, but they have buckets of dreams and desires that they hold in common, where they relate to you. Pains and problems, same thing. I don't know how to do the tech around virtual events, right? It's a frustration. It could be a fear. For many people it is, and it's a problem for some. So you have those buckets of things in your audience, your target audience, and those are the things they care about. Those are the things they have emotions about. And those are the things, when you begin to talk about them in any venue, in any medium, you grab their attention, you get them to be interested in what you're talking about. And then they begin to talk themselves into, how do I make what Roger's talking about? How do I make what Donnie's talking about a reality in my life? Because that's my dream. That's my desire. Or that's my fear I need to get away from. So it all starts there. But you're right. Across the board, you're going to have the same fundamentals at play.
And I would imagine a number of people here, are nodding their heads figuratively or literally going, all right, yeah, we need to have a goal and we need to know our audience and know what they want to move toward or away from. But I've subscribed to your personal email list for years. And I also know that you kind of relate differently when you're writing email than probably the typical B2B marketer is pumping out email.
For sure.
Just curious, where do you see overlap, and where do you go, hey, I'm not sure that typical hello and welcome to is the right approach? I'll just put it there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a spectacular question. I'll tell you, in my view, most B2B marketers are doing it wrong. And not because there's anything wrong with the format. It's formal, it's professional, it's buttoned up, and it feels right. But the truth of the matter is, B2B, you're still talking person to person, human to human, and I say all the time, even lawyers don't like to read legalese. It's not something that they enjoy. They don't go home and pick up legal briefs, right? Oh, what in my spare time is what I'm going to do.
Yeah, exactly. Lord of the Rings, read some more legal briefs.
No, they don't like to do it at work either. That's why they have paralegals. You read this and give it to me in human speak, right? Please, with the important citations and precedents in order. But But it's true. So the same thing is true for B2B emails or anything B2B. You want to have a level of professionalism in your presentation. Makes perfect sense. But if you want people to read your emails, you want people to continue to read them over time. That's another trend that you see if you pay attention to your data. A lot of times you have high levels of engagement in the beginning and it tapers off over time because there's boredom, there's predictability, there's, whatever they came to you for in the first place begins to fizzle out a little or cool down, or they found something else more interesting to pay attention to. So your presentation is super important. But again, you're speaking human to human. Even if you're speaking as an organization, you're speaking to an individual, be he a CEO, CTO, VP of anything, right? They're an individual, and they want to read something that's valuable, but also interesting. Also, helps them to, you're having a boring day, legal brief after legal brief, or contract after contract, or employee problem after employee problem. When this email comes in, it could be the bright spot of their day. So you can do that in two ways. Again, value, of course, if you're answering their questions that they have or helping them to move forward in their whatever their desires are. There's that, but also just plain people like personality, people like funny, humorous things, people like enjoyable things. I wrote down 13 different ways you could be entertaining in an email. Off the top of my head, I don't remember what all of them are. But you want to have a level of entertainment, which can take multiple forms in your email. So your emails, B2B, can still have personality. I guess long story short, they can have some personality, and they should.
Speaking of that, I actually happened to breeze by that on your blog. So Donnie, DONNIE Bryant with a Y.com is where you can go dig in a little more on his 13 different ways of being entertaining. I love that word interesting because I like made up words like interestingness. How do we raise the interestingness? True story. One time I don't do a lot of the stuff thing where I'm doing the promotion and, because my personal, gig, most of my 23 years in this space has been around presentation rather than promotion. But I've experimented with like the confirmation emails, customizing the confirmation email that you get after you've registered for an event, and then you get that little confirmation or the reminder email 1 hour before, the day before. And I'm like, does anybody pay attention to these? Nobody pays attention to these. So I changed like the subject line to "Don't kill a unicorn." And when you opened it, it was like, hey, the research shows that every time somebody registers for but doesn't attend a webinar, a unicorn somewhere in the universe dies. And I don't know if it made any difference because I wasn't tracking it that close, but
it made a difference.
I'm not above talking about unicorns in webinar emails if that's what I've got to do.
That's spectacular. I think your thinking is right about that. There's a level of propriety or whatever. People feel like a confirmation should just say, "Thank you for registering." We'll send the webinar link at 12:47 p.m. on the dot. That's when they get ignored. But when you send emails about unicorns, and it makes me smile or chuckle a little bit, in my mind, I say there's a reward attached to reading emails from these people, this organization. And so I'll read the next one. And that's how you keep that, like I said, the tapering off of engagement over time. I think I'm reversed. So it looks like I'm doing it in the opposite direction. But the tapering off doesn't happen as quickly and can actually go in the other direction. When you engage people in a way that they enjoy reading your emails, they enjoy responding to your emails. And one of the things that you see, I don't know, I don't think I've tracked like webinar registration confirmation emails in terms of open, how often they're open and engaged with. But when somebody first signs up for anything, that the first email that you send out, the welcome email, is by far the most read email in anything broadcast. In the world of email. So, you got to capitalize on opportunities like that.
Yeah. You know what? That's one of the things that grieves me about this space or industry. I started long enough ago when none of that was automated. We literally built registration pages by hand and pushed out confirmation reminder emails, meaning you had to write it. And we might have had some language around it. But now, and to be fair, the whole purpose of software and the way that it has developed is that it automates taking the time, date, title, blah, 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 and saves you whatever and automates that reminder process.
Right.
But it also now is predictable. Does anybody look at a reminder email going, oh, 3 weeks ago I signed up for this email? No, by and large, most of the time, those don't really give you what to me is the key reminder, which is, why did I sign up for this in the first place? Why? Yeah. What's the why I was going to spend 3 weeks ago? I thought it was going to be a good idea to spend an hour with you, and now I'm just getting something entirely mechanical.
Exactly.
And some systems allow you to customize those confirmation emails and reminder emails, and some don't. And some people, of course, now integrate their webinar process, webinars with HubSpot or Salesforce.com or Marketo or whatever to alleviate part of that problem, right? Because otherwise it's mechanical. Oh yeah, got a webinar tomorrow. And 3 weeks ago, my calendar wasn't full. Now my calendar is full. And if I'll show up if I got nothing better to do, which is part of why response rates in terms of attendance has been dropping.
Well, let me turn it on you for a second. What are the numbers that you're seeing? Because I'm seeing the same thing. I'm curious to hear what you're seeing in terms of that declension, if you don't mind. Don't mind old school word.
Bring it, brother. I love good words. Declension. Well, you know what? It's one of those dirty little secrets that nobody inside of the industry wants to talk about, because they want to tell you that webinars are better than buttered and sliced bread than any other marketing tactic. And there are some ways that they are uniquely powerful, because one, they have a life cycle, right? Yeah. If you register for a white paper or anything else, it's a one and done, right? You just captured what it is that was on the landing or squeeze page. Whereas webinars have a life cycle, and whether it's the registration page, but also the polling data, the questions that get asked, a post-event survey, can all get appended to a record that gives you additional information to act upon if you want to. Yeah. That said, you kind of said, there's a big chunk of B2B marketing that's doing it wrong. Well, here's one thing that sadly is really wrong in the world of conferencing vendors, and I call it the Uncle Joe syndrome. Uncle Joe knows how to play golf. I don't know how to play golf. I learned to play golf from Uncle Joe, but I don't realize that Uncle Joe is a hack. So I learned to hack too. Here's the problem. At the most basic level, what marketers get measured on is registration, meaning I have gotten a lead. They almost never have those downstream metrics, as in, did I actually gather some actionable data that improved some form of response down the road, number of sales calls, number of demos, revenue, whatever. And consequently, the message from marketing has often been, please register. And if you can't make it, I'll send you the recording. And the implicit message is that there is no experiential difference of getting the recording versus showing up to the live event. Now, I'm doing a little too much talking here, but I'm going to just leave it in one place. If you went to an in-person event and sat down and you're, okay, it's about time to start. And the moderator gets up and says, all right, it's time for Roger to come on stage, or Donnie to come on stage. And everybody's sitting there expecting you to walk out, and they pushed go and played a video for 45 minutes and then said, do you have any questions? You'd think you got ripped off.
Oh, yeah.
Why do we do that in webinars? It's not because it can't be a different way. It's because Uncle Joe syndrome. 45 minutes plus Q&A. That must be how a webinar works, right? And so I think one of the core challenges is some of the imagination around going, wait a minute, real people, connecting with real people authentically is the most powerful thing you can do. Because you can deliver information in a lot of ways, but we have something unique that happens when we're live that you can't do in a white paper. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox. Back to Donnie on the soapbox.
No, that's spectacular. I mean, your point is such a good one, and I was saying that because I've seen a similar thing. I don't analyze the data probably as deeply as you do, downstream all the way. But the attendance rate on webinars, if you're getting 30%, you're probably relatively happy these days. Are you seeing a similar number?
Yeah. No, actually, and that was your question, and then I got on a soapbox.
No, you answered the question that needed to be answered.
Well, no. So it's roughly speaking, if you don't know any other variables, call it a third will show up, right?
Yeah.
If it's paid, well, 98% are going to show up. But I also have had clients like in certain IT sectors where their average attendance rate is single digit. So to me, there are a lot of factors and nuances, but if we just don't help ourselves if we tell our audience explicitly or implicitly that there is no difference between the recording and showing up to the live event. We wouldn't do it in in-person events. And if you don't know how to transform a virtual event into something that's different, so it's not just the equivalent of a YouTube recording that happens to play at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, well, you got some work to do. I think third is still, in many cases, really generous, but over time, I think it's been dropping. Now, I can say that that's reversible, right? And it's what economists call an experience good. It's kind of hard to tell people some things in sales copy that, our webinars are different.
Yeah.
But when they show up and it's different, it's like, whoa, that was actually entertaining and fun, and I paid attention, and you had me engaged, and it doesn't have to be the way it is for a lot of folks. So
right. I mean, those are all, like I said, the questions that needed answers. Well, and it's valuable to the listener as well. I mean, seriously.
We kind of briefly spoke about the idea of being entertaining. And I know story is important to you. Talk to me about story. I mean, I know you do things at a much more nuanced level than probably you teach other people to do, but help the B2B marketer who's listening to this, or whoever, help them get their head around the nature of story. And I think at probably 50,000 feet, they'd all go, oh yeah, story is important, but let's bring it down. What do I do in my next email to increase the very thing that taps into the neuroscience of story?
Yeah. I mean, you're right. Pretty much anybody will agree. Yes, story is important. Yes, story is effective. And most people, as you said at the top of the show, right, they've heard and they will buy into the observation that facts tell, stories sell. I mean, there's truth. There is certainly truth to that. And we should be using stories when we can. Let me say this. Similar to what I was saying before, a lot of times in a B2B setting, we feel limited in what we can use as a story because we feel like there's some level of propriety.
Right. Oh, yeah. That doesn't have enough gravitas to talk about unicorns. Right.
This is what I'm saying. There's and maybe because Uncle Joe, he's very influential, and everyone's Uncle Joe, right? They say, okay, this is how you do it. This is how you have to present yourself. The ultimate measure, what you said, marketers get measured by a lead. There's a lot of things, but you got to produce customers, and that requires taking somebody, from they don't know you at all to I'm interested in what you have to say, and I'm a qualified lead who's able to take action and buy your offer, whatever that looks like. And that's a whole process. People are looking, they're looking for an experience. Not just on a live event. I mean, that's certainly the best expression of that. But every step along the way can and should be an experience, and you can work story into that. Let me say,
let me give you permission as you're getting ready to say that. Let me give you permission. Let's take this out of webinars and just just talk about email for the sake of persuasion, whether that's neuroscience or story or however you want to take it. Just run with it. Tell us a story. Tell us a story about your own use of story or neuroscience to generate a result.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for that permission. The story, it's fundamental to what we are as humans, right? So to rob ourselves of the opportunity because we feel like we had to be professional, we're hurting ourselves. So I wish I had a prepared story about this. But one thing that's true about me is uh, I think everything should be in a story. Everything. Listen, if you said, hey, there are companies that are seeing single digit response rates as a data point, but there's a story behind it, right? In my construction, stories really only have three components. Now you've heard of the hero's journey, right? There's Luke Skywalker. It makes sense, but I think one of the things that that trips people up, especially in B2B, because we feel constricted, is thinking, oh, I had to have 7 steps in building the story. It really doesn't have to be as complicated than that. Really, you need 3 things. Number 1 is you need characters. People are interested in people. Data can be a character too, if you figure that out. But there's people behind the data. There's people behind the facts. And people are interested in people. People are interested in people behind organizations too. That's why we can't stop talking about Steve Jobs. We can't leave him alone.
Exactly.
There's stories there. So then the second thing that you really need is tension. So there's an outcome that you don't know. Well, let me say this. The second thing is intention. So what does the character or the characters want to happen? What are they going after or going away from? And then the tension is it going to work out? You know, there's some risk involved. It could happen. It could not happen. There's danger along the way. And so even with data, you just had to think about it in those 3 things. Who are the characters? Who are the interesting people involved with the numbers? And that looks different for every story. Then what do they want? So you could say that if I'm getting single digit response to whatever I'm doing, my intention is I'm here to save the world, save the unicorns. There's unicorns at risk, and if I can't get people to give money to my crowdfunding thing or whatever your call to action is, then the unicorns will all die. They're going to be extinct. I just can't bid. So that's my intention, is to save the unicorns and really to bring other people along on this mission to save the unicorns. So I got to tell you what's cool about unicorns, why unicorns are important to you, why they're important to the earth, why they're important to your children, right? And all of those elements don't necessarily make it into your email per se, but you're thinking about them as you're constructing the story, because some of the things will come out if they seem particularly interesting and relevant.
Oh, yes. Thank you for saying that. And I think I even saw this on your website one time when I looked, when you just kind of opened with a few lines and went, hey, what's going on here? And your point was the brain is just constructing story, yeah. whether that was, whether you elucidated the whole thing or not, the brain's already going there.
Yeah. You can't help it, right? We fill in the blanks. Watch this. If you ever walk in the house and you say, honey, I'm home, right? But your wife didn't know you left her, or your kids didn't know. This happens every time. Every time I leave the house, my son calls me. Where are you at, Dad? Like I was looking for you. Anyway, but they didn't know you were gone. And then you say, I'm home or I'm back. They construct a story about where you were. They can't help it. Oh, he was probably out, at the bar with his friends, because that's the kind of guy that he is. With the information that they already have in their mind about you, about the topic, about the weather, whatever, they have banks of knowledge in their mind that automatically fill in those blanks of the stuff that they don't know. So in between your story, the details of your story about the unicorn, right? What do they know about unicorns already? What do they know about whatever you're talking about? They fill in a lot of those blanks.
Fair to say then part of the art of copywriting is figuring out how in an economy of language you're giving them the structure or the things that you know they're going to go fill in the blanks around.
That's the advanced art.
Right.
Right.
That's why people hire you and they go, oh yeah, that's going to take a lot of work.
Yeah. I mean, you figure it out over time. I mean, I think just like in a regular conversation, you kind of know there are things that you can say where the implicit meaning is beyond what you said explicitly. Right.
Yeah. And, as I'm thinking about our gravitas-driven industries, right? Banking, medical, legal, finance, there are definitely organizations in every one of those professional kinds of places that have begun to get more fun, right? I mean, whether it's the 404 page on their website that happens to be funny, or I've seen it in product requirements. Evernote does it brilliantly. I mean, I know this is not copywriting related, but if you look at like the release notes for the latest update of Evernote,
sure. Oh yeah.
They're actually speaking in human language and actually even funny in a couple places. Yes. And I'm like, hey, these people are like human.
Right.
But for those gravitas oriented industries, what might you say to someone who called you and said, Donnie, I love the idea of us telling story. I am in one of those industries and my boss is a curmudgeon and I'm not sure we can talk about unicorns. Where do we start?
Yeah. I mean, it's another great question. And it goes back to the 3 parts of story. There's character. So let's say you're a hospital, right? There's obviously a number of people involved in the whatever medical outlet we're talking about. There's patients or people who should be patients, right? That everyone has conditions. Yeah, I don't know if you would like write about a condition, but there are people who need help, right? And even if you're speaking in generalities, you can come up with, it could be a real person, or it could be like an idealized version who's representative of, let's say Sally. Sally's not a real person, but Sally is just like anybody who could walk through the doors of your clinic, right? So you can, in medical, you have protected health information. Some of these things you may be very careful about telling real people's stories,
right?
But you have an idealized version or a representative version. What are the motivations? What are the problems, etc.? That's just if you went with patients. You have doctors at the facility. They have interesting stories about discoveries or studies or whatever they've done in their life, and you could just tell some of the stories of accomplishments from the doctors. You could talk about the discovery of procedures or treatments, right? How did this come to pass? So there's things that are not unicorns. They're not wildly, imaginative per se. They're fact-based. They're industry rooted, but they're human interest. Even the story of penicillin being discovered, there's humanity involved there, right? You tell the story rather than giving me the chemical compounds inside of penicillin.
Right. You got my brain spinning. Oh, no, you're right. Because every one of those things comes back to a so what or a so that. Well, this is that so that you can experience this benefit or whatever. Right. And have you read Kendall Haven's work? Story?
I have. As a matter of fact, I have. It's really interesting because that's the 8-part thing that you were talking about before. The neuroscience-based story structure is Kendall Haven's. From Kendall Haven's study.
So just in case somebody here isn't aware, you can go Google Kendall Haven or find it on Amazon. But the nut of the work was a secondary analysis of all of the research around story, and found that,
Yeah.
of course, crazy enough. And how many times does science agree almost entirely across the board on something?
You don't see
Well,
it often.
we right, we pay attention to story unlike anything else. And there's even a kind of an esoteric discipline called narrative psychology,
Mm.
where the study was of how the conclusion of the study was that the even very young children begin to understand the context of narrative before they even understand all of the pieces, right?
Mm.
And back to that, character, conflict or tension, resolution,
Yeah.
moves in a particular
Yes.
direction, is just those are the essential elements that are rooted in science. But then the art of going, okay, how do we dig up the human interest piece? And I guess that's probably one of the powerful things that you bring to the table, to be totally fair. And I'm going to put Donnie's email address up here on the screen again, donnie.bryant.jr@gmail.com. But just out of curiosity, Donnie, when someone is considering whether or not to outsource, like copywriting, to someone like you versus can I do this myself, right? I'm in the service business. Virtual Venues is in the service business. And the question on the table, implicitly or explicitly, is why should I hire Virtual Venues to produce my webinar series or hybrid event, as
Well,
opposed to just doing it myself and giving it to the marketing assistant? When somebody is coming to you, what questions should they ask that they're often not asking?
you know what? That's a great question. I guess I've never really thought about it that way. When people come to me, I'm usually the one asking the questions.
That's fair.
The question, if somebody was coming to me and said, "Hey, I know that I have something that I need to get the message out into the world, and I'm wondering, can I do it myself? Should I find somebody else to do it? Should I put it into the AI writer and let the AI thing do it for me?" And the key question, here's the thing that's true. I found that a lot of people that come to me are very skilled in telling the stories. They just, number one, they may not have time for it. As a CEO of a company or CMO of a company, you're managing a team and you got a lot of things going on. You don't necessarily feel like you have time, and you may not really not have time to sit down and write an email once a week or what have you. That's one thing. And the other thing is, oftentimes, because of the Uncle Joe syndrome, you feel like you just don't have the confidence.
Mm,
If you were to sit down, if you did have time to do it, or sit down and just communicate authentically, you would probably be a lot better than you think, especially if you give yourself a little bit of time to figure out your voice. How do I want to appear? How do I want to communicate with my audience through this medium? Email, for example. You'll find, everybody posts on Facebook, right? Everybody does. You're doing it already. You just feel differently about, okay, this is a corporate email. I need to now be very different. There's some differences, but at its core, an interesting Facebook post could be an interesting email, as long as you're talking about whatever's relevant to your business. So I would say that if you take an honest self-assessment, uh, am I skilled? And the other thing that's true is, if you can talk about your business, you can write about your business. If nothing else, you can have somebody ask you a question, or you ask yourself a question, answer it verbally, transcribe it, and you've got the meat of your email, or the
right.
meat of your blog post, or the meat of whatever you want to write. You can edit, you can have your virtual assistant edit, you can have your team edit, but you got the core ideas down in the core argument that you want to make. You could do that daily and have content uh, internally, right? So the first question is, you ask yourself, am I skilled at telling my story without the constraints of putting in writing, without the constraints of, is this industry approved best practices? Does it sound like what Uncle Joe would say? Strip away those things. If I was telling you, Roger Corville, a story, or just talking about whatever my topic is, am I skilled at doing that? If the answer is yes, then you have a place to start in terms of if you wanted to do it internally. If you feel like, I don't really know how to do that. I don't know what's appealing to people. I don't know what's valuable to people. If you don't have confidence about that, then you probably should instantly look at hiring somebody. Could be a copywriter, or you could bring somebody in on your team, or there could be someone already on your team. Before I started writing copy as a copywriter, I was writing for the people I worked for. They just somehow happened providentially that someone would discover I know how to write. And I was writing emails for district manager at Kmart, for example. You remember Kmart stories. How am I writing for anyway? Because there's somebody internally who can tell the stories or who can relate the facts and communicate person to person. So I think that's the first question. Am I capable? Is this something I'm capable of doing? And it's something that I have the time to do. And secondly, I suppose would be, because we're talking about direct response, do I know how to sell? A lot of people, if you have a sales background, even if it's, pitching for investors or, doing presentations, persuasive kind of persuasions from a stage, if you know how to sell, then you can do this. If you're one of the leaders in an organization who really, you really don't know how to sell, but you need to sell in the medium that we're talking about, then you probably should find someone who can write for you. Those are probably the two questions that you can ask initially. If the question is, can I do this, or should I hire someone to do it? Those are the first two questions I think you should ask.
I'm just going to even, and I think you got there. Hiring services is in our world is similar, right? I mean, it's because people can't do it or they don't want to do it. And, firing up GoToMeeting or Zoom is not a hard thing.
Right.
Most of the time it's like, wait a minute, it's the same reason I go to Jiffy Lube to change my oil. It's not because I can't. It just doesn't make sense. They attack it with a team of 3 people. A few minutes later, I'm out the door for $35 and it just doesn't make sense.
Yes.
But you just made me think of something that actually I think you bring to the table, which is related to what Chip and Dan Heath, right, in Made to Stick, talk about the curse of knowledge, and they didn't originate that. That just happened to be the book that came to mind. But the curse of knowledge is sometimes I have trouble finding the forest for the trees balance, right? Yeah. And I know so much that I could talk about this stuff forever, but the part of the challenge with sending one email is tightening up a message for a story, for a purpose, for a moment, as opposed to info barfing at people because I don't know, 4,000 word emails don't work or something.
That's too much.
I would imagine, just maybe I'm making a statement, but I'm also just partially a query. I would imagine that you spend some time with regular clients helping them sort through all of that stuff that they have in their heads and parsing it out in a way that then, gets it actionable. Fair to say?
Yeah. It's a great observation. And I think the third point that you made is, do you even want to do that? If you're not, like, I don't want to change my oil. Believe me, I don't know how to do it either, but I could YouTube it, right, and figure it out.
Right.
But it doesn't make sense. Like you said, Jiffy Lube can do it quickly, professionally. I can be confident that it's done well. I don't have to get my hands dirty. It's a great deal.
Yeah. And I think there's a nuance. It's kind of like when you think about writing versus editing.
Yeah.
And that's in a way 2 different skills. And some of us do spend time writing know that if you're trying to edit as you're writing, sometimes that's really problematic. And it's time to put on the writer hat. It's time to put on the editor hat. And some people can go back and forth like that. And even still, I know that when I've worked with an editor on a number of things, it's really powerful to take that off of my back. It's almost easier for me to edit somebody else's stuff than it is to edit my own stuff because of they just see it differently. So
right. Well, I mean, it's the curse of knowledge, as you said. All these things are important. Of course they are. But from the perspective of an outsider, let's decide what's, really the message we got to get. How's a powerful way to present that? Because guess what? With email, I can send you another email tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's one thing that I feel like people also neglect is the idea that you can communicate in series over time rather than trying to say everything at once. It's a great idea to just talk about one thing at a time, like you pointed out. What's the one thing we're going to talk about that's impactful today, and tackle the rest of them in the future?
I would imagine there is a whole another conversation to be had just around some of those frequently asked questions, like timing, morning, afternoon. Should I drop stuff at Tuesdays or Wednesdays? And I know that's a moving target. I didn't bring that up early enough, and I'm just going to look right at the camera and even turn Donnie's email address back on. Have that conversation with Donnie. We have that conversation in the virtual events business all the time. And the answer is there are broad statistics and then there are your statistics. And so call Donnie and get out of the milieu of what somebody's doing, some analysis that's so general it's not useful to you, and talk about you would be my encouragement. Donnie, as we move toward wrapping up here, are there any questions that I should have asked you that I haven't?
I think that you asked great questions, and I know we didn't necessarily plan any of this.
Well, this is just us having a cup of coffee and talking about stuff pro to pro. So
yeah. So I can't think of any questions that I wish Roger had asked that. I can't think of anything.
Okay. One last time, tell us about your upcoming conference or some other aspect of things that they either where they can find Donnie or get a little more, learn more about you.
Okay. Well, sorry, my phone is doing something weird now. This is the question. This is the question that I don't love. My website exists. I don't pay enough attention to it. But there's my latest thoughts on marketing, copywriting, persuasion. They're all there at Donnie-Bryant.com. I feel that if you're thinking about email, my YouTube channel is pretty valuable. I talk about email at length, but I also created subject line of the day. I did 101. It's really more like 106 subject lines. That's awesome. And then I explained why they work in YouTube Shorts. So you get in 1 minute or less. I think my shortest video is about 18 seconds. I tell you what is a subject line that you can model or straight up steal for your own emails. Now, if you're working for a medical outlet, some of these will not work for you, but they're definitely something that can inspire your thinking about how to engage someone psychologically, emotionally, and intellectually so that they want to open your emails. And from there, then, of course, you get to work your magic. So I think my YouTube channel is also valuable. So the handle is, I think, Donnie Bryant. It might just be Donnie Bryant, but if you search for Donnie Bryant on YouTube, I think there's a mechanic and then there's me. I'm not the mechanic.
It'll be easy to tell them apart.
Yeah. So there's that. And then also, I mean, as you alluded to before, my email newsletter, which I try to do once a week. I need to be a little more consistent. But if you go to my website, you can sign up for it there. And that's really where the latest thoughts are, whatever I'm noodling on. That's where you can find that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm almost without a closing thought. I'm just really appreciative, and I would hope that you go give Donnie's YouTube channel a like or a thumbs up or subscribe to his email or something like that. And best of all, give him a call and find out what he can do for you. And I don't say that as a sales pitch. I say that because I've worked with him before, and I know that as we talked about up front, we're on the same page of going, we help people first. And when it works out, it's because it's the right thing to work together. And that's one of the things I love about this guy. Donnie, I really appreciate you spending a little time. Obviously, we'll let you know when this goes live. And for the rest of you, thank you for joining us for another version of V2's Thought Leader Conversations series. And we will see you